2020 has brought an array of unforeseen events, and our vocabulary has adapted to follow suit. I don't think we have ever used the word mask as many times as we have in the year of 2020. We've even invented new words that apply to this unusual word. Words like doom scrolling. Doom scrolling is scrolling through our news and social media on a never-ending hunt for bad news. It could be about the state of politics or about COVID. For some reason, our little brains get sucked into the toxic combination of indignation, fear, anger, and disbelief. And we seek out more of it. Due to the events of 2020, the algorithms of social media and the toxic marketing of entertainment news, once we start down the rabbit hole, there's a never-ending supply. Some unfortunate part of our nature craves the satisfaction of finding fault. This pleasure of fault finding, I think, is also part of why Americans are so attracted to reality television. There's something strangely satisfying about seeing people behave poorly and judging them for it. I'll admit, several years ago, I had a bad habit of watching The Real Housewives on Sunday after church. The materialism and self-centeredness that was the antithesis of everything our ministry is about. So in that post-worship service tiredness, judging those awful people felt so satisfying. But when does entertainment become habit? And when does habit begin to shape who we are? A couple of days ago, I went outside for a walk, and I walked out my front door, saw my neighbor's Christmas lights, and thought, those are tacky. I've been trying to incorporate early evening walks into my self-care routine. By the time I arrived home, I realized what a Scrooge I was when my gut reaction to someone's Christmas lights were, that's tacky. So I'm trying to invest a little less energy in finding faults and more energy in appreciating the good stuff. It's not to be all sunshine and rainbows. Fault finding does serve an important role. It's the linchpin of the scientific method, challenging each other's assumptions and repeatedly demonstrating why our own theory is correct. Seeing faults also challenges authoritarian leadership and traditions that are oppressive or that outlast their usefulness. Critical thought plays an important role in developing a free and fair world, but it's the habit of fault finding, the joy that we sometimes derive from it, that alarms me. Our reading from earlier talked about the difference between making a show of kindness and actually being a kind person. Both the show of kindness and being an authentically kind person take work. So why not invest in the real thing rather than the show? Kindfulness, as I was learning this week, is one of the ways that we grow into being kind people, not just making a show of it. Kindfulness is not a typo or a word that I made up. Kindfulness is a recent twist on the well-established and very well-researched practice of mindfulness meditation. A small handful of Tapestry members have been participating in Wednesday night meditations based on mindfulness. Mindfulness has been around in the Western world since the 1970s. It's an outgrowth of Hindu and Buddhist practices that are way, way older. But in the West, since the 70s, it's gained huge popularity and been well researched by psychologists and proven pretty effective. The purpose of mindfulness is to set aside distractions of the outside world and become more deeply aware of ourselves. This involves awareness of our mental, emotional, and physical states. And I know paying attention to how you feel sounds so simple. But let me give you a better look of the kind of detail that's involved. One very popular form of mindfulness meditation is called a body scan. And you've probably been led through a version of this. It's something you can do very easily on your own. It's a practice of very, very slowly paying attention to different parts of your body, from the top of your head to the tips of your toes. Paying close attention. Noticing things like, can you feel the spot that is the very, very tip top of your head? Are your brows furrowed? Notice whether or not your jaw is clenched. Is your tongue relaxed? Do you feel the breath coming in and out of your nose or mouth? How does your neck feel? Is there tension in your shoulders? Is that tension at the top of your shoulders near your neck, or is it further back down toward the top of your back? You get the picture. It's a very slow and careful scan of your body. And in doing that exercise, we recognize the multitude of sensations, sometimes pleasant, sometimes not pleasant, that we are completely oblivious to most of the time. With similar non-judgmental observation, mindfulness practitioners pay close attention to their emotions and thoughts as they arise. The idea is, when we pay attention, when we notice things and let go of them, we take away some of their power. Instead of having a constant chaos behind the curtain, we peel the curtain back and say, hey, what's going on in there? We take a look and then move on with living our lives. Some practitioners of mindfulness talk about monkey mind. It's that chaos of the mind. I don't know what magic happened when I hit the age of 40 a couple of years ago, but for some reason, on some totally random nights, just when I lay down in bed, my monkey mind goes bonkers. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Instead of calming down and resting, my mind conjures up 1,000 different concerns and adventures and joys at roller coaster speed. That's an example of monkey mind popping up in my life. It's a funny term for something that we all experience. It's the busy, uncontrolled piece of our mind that jumps to odd places. Like a mischievous monkey, the more you try to control our thoughts or subdue them, the more erratic and mischievous they can be. A recent new flavor of mindfulness is, well, you guessed it, kindfulness. Kindfulness is basically applying a healthy dose of kindness to your mindfulness practice. You might look at it this way. Mindfulness is observing the monkey mind without judgment. But if you take the monkey analogy a little bit further, kindfulness is befriending the monkey so that it might be a little bit more cooperative. Remember, this monkey is too big and too wily to be controlled by force. So our best bet is to befriend it and encourage it toward cooperation. It's never going to be perfectly controlled. It's a monkey with a will of its own. But if we're going to be living together, befriending it is the best option. That means paying close attention to our thoughts and feelings and being very kind to what we find there. This is both about a meditation practice and about how we live our day-to-day lives. In meditation, we acknowledge and try to befriend our monkey minds. In daily life, we acknowledge our emotions and thoughts and greet them with kindness as they arrive, even if they're not logical or behaving themselves. Let me give you a few examples of what that looks like. One came up a few weeks ago in the minister's reading group. I even talked about this book in a sermon a couple of weeks ago. The book we were discussing was challenging. It was about racism. The author didn't hold anything back in her description of how white people are often complicit in maintaining inequality and exploitation. The discussion was interesting. All of the participants in the discussion pushed back against what the author said. And while reading it, I too wanted to say, no. If I had been reading a paper version and not an electronic version, there would have been some serious notes of objection in the margins. We wanted so badly to disagree with the author. Eventually, in the conversation, though, it became clear that we didn't disagree with the content, the facts that she provided, but we found what she was saying deeply uncomfortable. Have you ever had that experience? Have you held in your heart the feeling that, no, this is just too ugly to be true? Even while you know in your head that yes, these are the awful, true facts. Approaching that book, I found that offering my illogical, emotional response a little compassion was more useful than trying to coerce my heart into agreeing with the facts. We try to be reasonable people. We invest in education. We hold high regard for logic. Sometimes, though, powerful feelings and thoughts emerge that don't correspond with the facts. It's okay to recognize those feelings and be gentle with them. Another opportunity for practicing kindfulness came up in a conversation with someone dealing with COVID-19. I've actually had this conversation with a few people. This was someone that is safe and followed the rules and still somehow contracted the virus. The illness is rough, and being separated from family is rough. And as someone who follows the rules, there's anger there. It's not fair. And perhaps the worst part, the icing on the cake, is being hard on oneself for those illogical feelings of anger and unfairness. Knowing when anger is not a logical response. I've told these folks, don't beat yourself up for what you're feeling. Feeling a little angry is different from being a jerk to other people. Even if the feeling isn't all that logical, have compassion for that part of yourself that's angry instead of fighting it. If you were listening to the Time for All Ages, you know what's happening tonight at 2 a.m. It's the winter solstice, when the sun's rays are most direct over the Tropic of Cancer and the Southern Hemisphere. What that means for us is that today and tomorrow are the 2 days of the year with the fewest hours of sunlight. The shortest days of the year. And if you're anything like me, you've been feeling that in your bones. Solstice has become an important holiday for me. I like solstice because it observes a clear scientific fact. And connected to that observable mechanical fact comes a deeply emotional human response. This time of year, religious traditions in the Northern Hemisphere embrace an array of holidays, all of them speaking of hope and light. We put up trees, we light menorahs, we adorn our homes with lights. It's a season of gift giving and special food. It's a time for cheer, and in any other year, a time for extra hugs. All this festivity is like our shared attempt at pushing back against the darkness. For thousands of years, this time of year, we've pushed back against the darkness because we are not completely logical or rational robots that observe the solstice as if through a science textbook. We human beings are also animals, attuned to the rhythm of the earth. Our hearts and minds are challenged in the darkness of this time of year. Our hearts and minds are challenged in the darkness of this time of year. If it's not the happiest season of all, you haven't failed. If there are feelings this time of year that are not completely rational, well, I have good news for you. You're a human being. The holidays are an incredibly complicated time of year filled with illogical and contradictory feelings. It's worthwhile to chase a little cheer. I invite you in that thousands of years old drive to chase away the darkness and kindle the fire of warmth in our hearts, put up trees, sing some carols, write some cards, and most importantly, reach out in whatever way you can to your loved ones. And in the midst of that effort, let us also be kind to ourselves if that cheer is elusive. Be kind to yourself as those memories come and those feelings of joy and longing pop up in one confusing, tangled bow. Pay attention to those feelings. Befriend the monkey mind and be gentle with yourself this season. Amen.